Welcome again to GPS, God's Prophetic Surprises. I'm Jon Paulien, the School of Religion at Loma University, and with me is
Viana Chambers from the Kalamazoo Church.
And I'm Philip Milosavljevic, young adult pastor at Loma University Church.
Awesome. And I gather that weeks sometimes are quite interesting, and so I'm going to ask Viana, what was the most exciting or depressing thing that happened this week?
Definitely exciting and depressing because our senior pastor, John Ciccarelli, got moved up to the conference to be our ministerial director, which is great news for all of us. But of course, we're mourning that loss, and we're grieving his departure. So.
And he is such a sweet and encouraging spirit.
He is.
That's
he is.
That will be a tough loss. Well, courage to you.
Thank you.
Philip, anything happened this week?
Oh boy, our little 7-month-old is sick, and so that's been kind of tough. But she's a trooper, trying to get her to sleep in the midst of that. I twisted my ankle yesterday playing basketball. I love playing with a team of guys. They play at 5:30 in the morning.
Awesome.
5:30 in the morning. And I came down on one of their ankles, another fellow pastor, and Delroy,
I did that a lot when I was a teenager, coming down on people's sneaker, and then they pull the foot back, and there goes your ankle. Never broke it, but was hobbling more than once.
Oh yeah.
Was it worth it?
It was worth it.
Okay, that's all that matters.
I have deformed ankles at this point.
Well, I still run upstairs, even at my age, because it hurts less than walking upstairs.
Oh my goodness.
The knees have been twisted a few times, so.
That works to your advantage, though, right?
Yeah.
The exercise.
Get there faster, get some good cardio.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what happened with you?
Oh, thank you for asking. Yeah. Well, the most exciting thing this week is to hook up with an old friend from New York City. About 40 years ago, I was pastoring in New York City, and there were about 60 people coming to public meetings that I was holding. And I had about 7 members of the church who promised to help me with the meetings, and by the second week, none of them were showing up.
Whoa.
And I realized I was on my own in the big city with a whole lot of interested people coming. So I prayed that God would send me an associate pastor of some kind, just somebody who could help me.
Yeah.
And in the next meeting, a fellow comes in the back, and he looked like a Baptist pastor. He was dressed in a 3-piece suit. He was African American. He just looked really, really sharp, and he sat right at the back in this room full of about 60 Caucasian people. And me up in the front, about half his age, or so it seemed. Anyway, I was just praying, Lord, keep him here. I want to talk to him. I want to make sure he's comfortable and all the rest of that. End of the meeting, about a dozen people came mobbing forward to ask questions. And the whole time I'm answering them, I'm looking at, he's still sitting there, still sitting there. Finally went up to him and I said, hi, I'm Jon Paulien. As you know, what brought you here tonight? He says, well, I've been praying that God would expand my life into some form of ministry, deeper ministry. And he says, I got your flyer in the mail, and I just felt compelled to come.
What?
And I couldn't find a parking spot, and so I was about to leave and go to prayer meeting when a parking spot opened up. I said, thank you, Lord. And I came in, and I'm here to figure out why I'm here.
Wow.
And I said, well, I've been praying for an associate, and something tells me you're the man. He says, well, I'm president of a corporation. I work 80 hours a week, but let me think about it. Go visiting with you, attend the meetings, work with the people. And for 2 years, we worked together in New York City, and we reconnected a couple of years ago, and he came and stayed for a week with us, and it was just delightful.
Wow.
Back then, New York City, there was a lot of racial divisions and stuff, and the two of us could go anywhere in the city and visit and be accepted. And he would just love people with his eyes. He just look at them. You just knew that this guy was there for you. And people would see God in him. It was just so good.
Wow.
So that was more of a joy than anything else.
Yeah, what a great testimony. And what year was this that it happened in your-
1979, I think, was the time when we met, and we
You
worked.
weren't even alive.
I wasn't born then. Were you?
No, me either.
No.
And we worked consistently together for a couple of years, and then I moved to Andrews University to get my doctoral degree and move into a different line of ministry. And we sort of lost touch for 25 years or so, and one day I picked up an old day runner and saw that number there, name and number, and I thought, well, wouldn't hurt to try. I dialed the number, and he said he and his wife were just sitting there watching a TV show I was in, and saying, I wonder if we'll ever see him again. And I called. So God has kind of been on top of that relationship from the beginning.
Wow. I love that.
Good stuff.
I love
What a
that.
great story.
Al Coley is the name, great guy. If he's watching this program, you're the best. God bless you.
Please come and be on the show.
Yep. Well, he left a couple days ago, so that would have been nice to have had him in the studio. But Revelation 10, 5-7 is where we left off, and I invite one of you to read that for us again.
All right, I'll read that. And the angel whom I saw standing on the sea was also on the land, and raised his right hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, that there would be no more delay. But that in the days of the trumpet call, to be sounded by the seventh angel, the mystery of God would be fulfilled, just as he had announced to his servants, the prophets.
Mm-hmm. So, just looking at verses 5 and 6, which we covered considerably last time, I think there's two things that stand out. Number one is the allusion to Daniel 12.
Yeah.
And we talked about that last time. The allusion to Daniel 12, the angel standing there with his hand up, swearing by the one who lives forever. That's a pretty solid allusion. But as we noticed, when New Testament writers allude or quote to the Old Testament, they do that to bring a whole context in mind. And so this whole idea of time no more raises the question, what kind of time? And you go back to Daniel 8-12, which is the Hebrew part of Daniel, the end of Daniel. Daniel 8-12 has 2,300 evenings and mornings, 70 weeks, 1,260 days, 1,290 days, 1,335 days, all kinds of prophetic time periods. So when this angel says, time is no more, he's taking the statement in Daniel 12:7, time times and half a time, and changing it and saying, time is no more. So whatever those time periods meant in Daniel, they're done.
So the time period in terms of prophetic time is over.
Prophetic time.
So there are no
over.
more prophetic time periods that point to an event happening. This is the last.
This is the last one. There's no prophetic time period for the second coming.
Yeah. So this is in essence telling God's people, hey, you don't need to be looking into the stars and all these different things. There's nothing coming besides the second coming of Jesus. This is the last thing.
Yeah. And I don't blame William Miller. For those of you who don't know who he is, he was a preacher, an American preacher, I think of a Baptist. He was a Baptist. And he became convinced that the time prophecies of Daniel were all pointing to about 1843, 1844. And he had elaborate arguments for this. And some of them at least have proven to be quite solid, depending on where you begin the period. 1843, 1844 would certainly seem to be that. But he understood the time no more to be,
The end of time.
You know, people say take the Bible as it reads.
Yeah.
It says time no more, end of time. What does that mean? Second coming. It's all over, right?
Yeah. Right.
Makes perfect sense if you take the Bible as it reads.
Right.
But he missed two things.
What two things?
First of all, in the book of Daniel, the time prophecies don't lead to the end of the world. They lead to the time of the end.
Okay.
There's a time of the end in which Daniel's book would become important again. All right? And the other thing he missed is verse 7. which talks about what happens after the time no more and before the end of the world. So within Revelation 10 and within Daniel both, it would have been possible to read them in a way different than Miller. But he just missed that. He calculated all kinds of detail, but he missed that particular piece. Now, those who believe that God was in that would say Miller was right about the time, but wrong about the event. And that's where Seventh-day Adventists come in. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is people from Miller's movement that accepted that way of reading Revelation 10, but said, no, he missed something here. The text actually says there's a period of time between the end of Daniel's time prophecies and the end of the world, and during that period, the gospel will go out to the world.
So is it in that little segment that we find, like, the mystery of God will be fulfilled?
Okay. Right. So in verse 7, you have the mystery of God will be finished. The seventh angel will sound his trumpet. And it says, when the seventh angel is about to sound, the mystery of God will be finished. So
about to sound.
About to sound. See, that's the key. In the Greek language, hotan malei salpizen, when he is about to, malei, sound the trumpet, salpizen. So when the seventh angel is about to blow his trumpet, when he's got it up in the air, his mouth is open, freeze frame, the mystery of God is finished. So what we want to do next is ask the question, what is the mystery of God and what does it mean that it's finished? All right? So there's a period of time after the close of Daniel's time prophecies when the mystery of God is being preached.
Okay. So now, if we were just to, before we kind of close that chapter then, can I read one thing that would add to the conversation for us? So we're getting to this end of prophetic time. I wanted to just read this one piece from a woman by the name of Ellen White, who's a fairly prominent figure in the Adventist community. And she wrote about this end of time history, but to specify exactly what's being referenced here in Revelation 10, 6, and 7. And she writes this here in Commentary Volume 7. This time which the angel declares with a solemn oath is not the end of world's history, as you had said earlier, neither of probationary time,
which we'll get to,
prophetic time. So that's very important to emphasize. And then she goes on to say this, which should precede the advent of our Lord. So it's right before Jesus is coming. That is, the people will not have another message upon definite time. After this period of time, reaching from 1842 to 1844, there can be no definite tracing of prophetic time. The longest reckoning reaches to the autumn of 1844. So here she's actually emphasizing exactly what we brought up. You said, hey, wait, is this in-between? Absolutely. And it's the end of prophetic time, not world history. So I think that's important that we recognize here. I think there's some religious communities that look at this and interpret this as saying the end of the world, which William Miller also kind of thought through. So I love how you bring in the Greek to give us a clarity on this. I think there's so much there. I mean, Vian and I did seminary courses, but I don't know if we always have a grasp of the text at that level. But there's so much profound meaning to know it at that level.
I remember the author of a commentary on Revelation challenged me on a couple of these points. And I said, but the Greek, and he says, Greek. He says, what do you know about Greek?
Oh, dear.
He says, my professors at the University of Chicago, they knew Greek, you know.
Oh,
and so it was a friendly little debate, and it tickled me no end when a couple of years later we had a chance to visit the British Museum together in London, and we came across Sinaiticus.
Oh.
Sinaiticus is this great manuscript, one of the two oldest full manuscripts of the New Testament in Greek. You see, we have a lot of fragments before that, but these are the earliest. This one and Vaticanus is the other one, are the two oldest manuscripts in the Greek. And there's no punctuation. There's no spaces between the words. It's just these masses of letters. You know, and I'm looking at the thing, and what you do, first of all, is you look at the word for the word and, which in Greek is kai, K-A-I. Because in the Greek language, chi appears only as that word. That combination of words almost never appears in any other combination. So if you find a chi, that probably means that's a distinct word. Then what's the word in front of it and what's the word behind it? You know, so I'm over here kind of looking at this, and then suddenly, hey, I says, look at this. See that? This is my body. I said, this is the Lord's Supper. It's the text that's in front of us here. We started going through, working it through, and he looked at me weird, and he says, you do know this stuff, don't you? Vindication. It's one of those great things, yeah. One of my professors, and at that point a colleague, I was able to say, okay, we're at least on equal terms.
I love it. I love it.
We get those rare moments in time.
That's
Enjoy
right.
them.
That's right. But now, Viana.
Yeah.
The way Seventh-day Adventists have understood this text, it might point us to the year 1844 as a vital year. Would you say that year means anything to believers in your generation? What does that do for you or not?
When I was studying this, I asked myself that question too. And one thing that I was reading in this book, Tell It to the World by Mervyn Maxwell, is that I actually earmarked it. It talks about William Miller, and something in particular struck me as like, this is not the way they portray William Miller. And it says, if I may read. So much greater was Miller's emphasis on preparation of heart than on calculation of time, that when Jesus did not come on October 22, he would say in all honesty, I wish to inquire whether my teachings have been materially affected by the disappointment. And when I read that, I said, how beautiful would it be to have this message in our generation to say, friends, what if we focus on the heart, on preparing the heart, that whether or not the day falls on October 22 or the year 2012 or like whatever year that we think it might be, or focusing in on details like you were saying, that like maybe this is the end of time, that maybe for us is not relevant to figure out what a dragon means or what a lion means or a little horn, but to be focused on the preparation of the heart, that the disappointments in life wouldn't be so bitter to us.
Yeah.
So you might say that the story of Miller and the story of the disappointment may be more powerful for your generation than whether it happened in 1844 or 1842 or 1853.
That's how I feel about it,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean, I think there's some beauty about understanding the history. I don't know if we necessarily get captivated in the history as much as we could. I think understanding that probably would be helpful in this time period. We're going to do a series in our young adult ministry called Roots, and understanding kind of the roots of where we came from. Because I think this generation is losing their historical understanding of really where we came from and why that's so important to understand today.
Absolutely.
Without that, I mean, it's like, do you even know what your purpose is here on this earth? Do you get the idea of like, hey, this angel is about to sound. There is a message that needs to go out into the world. Do you comprehend that? There's something really important with that. And so I think, is the date 1844? I think there's some credence to understanding that.
Yeah.
Does our generation get it? Do they care about it? I mean, that's another question. I don't know if it necessarily makes a difference to a lot of us at this space and time, but could it? Absolutely. I think it could.
Well, I would look at it this way, and tell me if you think this would connect at all. It seems to me, you know, that whether it happened in any particular year back then isn't all that critical to us now, almost 200 years past the time. But what is critical is the question, if that's actually there, if those calculations are real, then it sets a time where a movement would begin that would be preaching God's final message. And that's important. And that's important today as well. Does that kind of reasoning help?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think what Viana read about William Miller is actually really important. You know, the time period isn't as essential as the heart that needs to be prepared for the end.
I wasn't aware of that statement, but that's a very good one. I think that's where what Miller would say, you know, if he were resurrected today and here now we're looking back almost 200 years, and he'd kind of like, I didn't expect that. I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that my primary message is still good.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, whether it's today or today or today or tomorrow is less important than are you ready today? Reminds me of a Jewish rabbi who was approached by a student that said, when should I get ready to meet God? And the rabbi said, the day before you die. And the student said, when will that be? And the rabbi said, no one knows. Therefore, the scriptures say, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your heart.
That's right.
So anyway, by the way, Al Coley was in Calamasa last Sabbath, and he saw you give the children's story. And he said, he says, I love the way they let the young people help in this church.
Thank you.
And I didn't, I didn't say anything right away, but after I said, how old do you think she is? So, she'll seem like a teenager, something like that.
I get that.
So if you ever think that we have a teenager on the set here, then you're not alone.
My feelings are not hurt.
No, probably not at all. So that's good stuff. But he really enjoyed that children's story. So.
Thank you.
You know, one
hopefully
thing,
the children did too. Isn't that funny? Sometimes the adults like the
They
children's
do.
story
Yeah.
more than the children do.
Sometimes mostly for them.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
you know, one thing I think that a story that resonates with all of us could be the story of any superhero, right? Overcoming and winning any great battle in the war that's about to happen. And I think of the Marvel Studios that's produced all these, 20-some, I think it's 22 films right now.
Whoa.
And the Endgame series ended. And they all portray this great battle to come. And I think what's interesting about this is there's no battle at this moment. It's really that mobilization of happening. Before the great battle, before this story, this epic storm occurs, this is that space and time where something important needs to happen. I think the question for us is like, what is that?
The revelation of the mystery of God, right?
That is so cool,
Yeah.
really, because I was thinking about that. That will set Revelation 10 in a bunch of contexts. First of all, to Daniel 12, time of the end. So for Daniel, there was this space between history and the end. Sixth trumpet, the hour, day, month, and year. That I would see as the same as this time no more. It is that crucial moment when things get unleashed. What gets unleashed? The demonic army for Armageddon.
Right.
That's right.
Counterpart of the 144,000,
Right.
which is
Right.
the gradual development of God's army, so to speak, if you use military language. God's army is being developed. So we're in this space when things are building up toward the end. I love the way you put that. And the tool of the building up is in verse 7, the mystery of God. It is the proclamation of the mystery of God that builds up God's people, but it also provokes and precipitates opposition.
Right. Right.
So,
And that's the thing, when you speak truth into darkness, the darkness doesn't always necessarily agree with it, and it comes out in full force. I think now this is the question that I find really relevant. I think we talked about this in a previous show, but it's here, the seventh angel sounded in the mystery of God, which in the Greek is the gospel, because it's literally euangelizo.
yeah.
In the Greek, and that's a term that really is a portrayal of everything that Jesus was and is and taught. And so the close of probation, this idea of, hey, the gospel, the teaching of Christ, the purpose of why he taught, it's come to an end because I'm coming. Whoa. So that means there's a mobilization and a mission required for God's people right now.
And you have two groups of response, one becoming more and more godlike and one becoming more and more demonic or Satan-like.
Sure.
And when that split becomes universal, probation will close because nobody's going to change their mind anymore. When people have gone that far down the road, they're not turning around.
Do you guys think that people actually become more evil? Or do you think that people even recognize that they're becoming more and more separated from God? Do you think that people actually make this choice, I'm going to be against God?
I would think that some people find no evidence for a God. And there might be a time in their mind where, like, there's nothing really you can say or do to me or convince me that there is a God. And I've had this conversation with people who are unbelievers. I'm like, is there anything that would make you believe in God? Anything we could say or like prove to you? And they say there's absolutely nothing. And so that kind of response reminds me of somebody that says, I've seen enough to say there is no God. Or maybe, I don't know it.
Yeah, no, I think people tend to slide one way or the other. The development of spiritual life is gradual. The development of opposition is gradual. When you finally get there, people justify it in their minds.
Yeah.
You know. But quickly, before we're done, Philip, would you do Daniel 2?
Yeah.
And Viana, Amos 3? Because we want to just take a look at this concept of mystery of God. It's an Old Testament concept rooted in the book of Daniel.
Which
verses 27 to 29.
All right, 27 to 29. Daniel 2. Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Your dream and visions of the head that lay on the bed of these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be after this, and he reveals mysteries made known to you what is to be.
So the mystery in Daniel is something about the future that God is revealing to Nebuchadnezzar. Amos 3:7.
Surely the Lord God does nothing without revealing his secret to his servants, the prophets.
So here we see the purpose of God's mystery is revelation of the future. But Romans 16, Philip, and Viana, Ephesians 3.
Romans 16,
25 to 27, and Ephesians 3 to 6. And read them quickly because we're in our last moments.
Now to him who is able to strengthen you according to my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ, according to the revelation of the mystery that was kept secret from long ages, but has now been disclosed through the prophetic writings and is made known to all nations, according to the command of the eternal God, to bring about the obedience of faith to the only God. To him be glory forever and ever, Jesus Christ. Amen.
All right, and Ephesians 3 to 6.
And how the mystery was made known to me by revelation, as I wrote above in a few words, a reading of which will enable you to perceive my understanding of the mystery of Christ. In former generations, this mystery was not made known to humankind, as it has now been revealed to his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit.
We can stop there. That's perfect. But the mystery of God that is proclaimed is clearly the gospel. God's prophetic surprise in the middle of all kinds of trouble is the gospel. That's it for today.